We're an online marketing platform. We help multi-location venues like national or international retailers, restaurant chains, drive online traffic into their stores. We started this business almost 5 years ago. And how it really started, it was, I've been in online marketing for over 10 years. I literally started it in my extra bedroom in a home office. And as the business or as the product grew, I needed help. And so I sourced a friend of mine by the name of Rav, who introduced me to Mo, who's my current partner. And we basically started an agency that sold a search marketing service to SMBs. And funny enough, we became victims of our own success. So what happened is that if any of you are familiar with online marketing, you know there's so many different moving parts and there's different disciplines and it's very difficult. And as we grew the business, we needed tools to help service the clients. So in our search to look for tools to automate and streamline what we were actually doing, we discovered that there was really nothing out there in the market. So aha moment number one, why don't we become the actual software provider versus a service provider? Long story short, in the fall of 2011, we raised venture capital financing. And over the last almost 4 years now, we've grown the business quite significantly. We have 35 employees. We have an office in San Francisco for sales as well as for business development. And these are just some of the brands and marketing agencies that we work with. It all started, funny enough, by 3 people from 3 very different backgrounds learning how to work with each other. So what I'm going to talk about today is what creates successful partnerships. So myself, I'm Anglo-Montrealer of Jewish background. Mohamed is Egyptian, Arab, and our third partner, who's no longer with the company, is Indian. So you have these 3 very diverse, cultural backgrounds, diverse personalities, I guess we were all in some category or another alpha males, coming together to build a business. And so some of the takeaways that I found in why we're so successful and how we're able to work together. First and foremost, you have to find people who are not like you, who are completely different from you. So in my context, I'm a marketer, a salesperson. I like to talk. I like to hear myself talk sometimes. Where Mo, on the other hand, is very much, he's an engineer. He's technical. He actually started, when we first started, he was actually the CTO. He helped build the entire system from A to Z. Very process-oriented, very, very, very logical and theoretical. And, I'm happy to say it that he's definitely, the choose someone smarter than you, but we complement each other in many different ways. Where, I had a completely different set of business skills than he did. And then, last but not least, it's so important to be able to trust the other people. So I've kind of outlined a handful of scenarios on how to deal with them. So trust. So is anybody here in business with their friends? Can you raise your hands? Okay. So friendship is great. You already know the person. It's a connection. You found someone. You have some common ground to start with. But what we found in our case, we had a common friend. And because we were friends, you're always, considerate of your friend. And sometimes it's a lot harder to say what's really on your mind because you have what I like to call other baggage attached to the relationship. And it makes it that much harder to be able to tell them what's what. And that goes to my next point, which is sugarcoating. What we found is that in trying to be diplomatic and trying to, not really say what's on your mind or how you really feel, you typically tend to beat around the bush and avoid what the real issue is. And in cases like that, what actually ended up happening, so our third partner, Rav, who was a common friend of both of ours, we had a harder time communicating with him because we were always cognizant of that friendship, versus Mo and I would just tell each other, like it is. You messed up, you should do it this way versus that way. And in the long run, it's just really served us better than, for example, sugarcoating it. And through that, you learn to tend to develop a respect for each other, right? You know where each other's strengths and weaknesses lie. And with that respect, you're able to start letting go, right? letting go of your sphere of control and giving the other person the ability to manage and be diligent around their area of control. And eventually that's how, we're able to grow and scale. So I heard the young lady saying before they have to clone themselves. So we've gone through the exact same struggles in growing because you are involved, meticulously involved in every aspect of the business. And by learning to be able to cede control to each other and work alongside each other, that's allowed us to grow to over 35 people and cede control to, department managers. The other thing we learned, being, alpha males, is that ego's involved in a lot of your decision making. And I guess fortunately for us, but unfortunate at the beginning, ego is, mutually exclusive with mutually inclusive of the business's success. You think everything you do, all the inputs that you make, the outcome is the success of the business. And by being able to let your ego go over time, it didn't happen, overnight, we were able to start putting the business's needs and priorities ahead of ours. And as that, we really saw the ability for the business to grow leaps and bounds. And so one early story was, and to this day I don't remember anymore what the fight was about. Mo and I got into a huge argument. Not talking, 2 days we didn't go, none of us came to the office. And, just one day until I, in retrospect, I was like, what did I do wrong? And I went to his house literally like 8:30 in the morning. I got him some Tim Hortons croissants and coffee. And that's all it took, was to be able to lay our differences aside and say, hey, what's up? What didn't you like? And being from different cultural backgrounds, what really happened is that my delivery and the way I talk is a lot more casual in the way, he's used to talking. In Egyptian culture, it's more formal. It's, you have to be more respectful in how you talk. And in Canadian culture, and, we're a lot more casual. So if I just say, hey, that's stupid what you did, I may not think it's a big deal in saying that to him or to saying it to someone else. But the truth is, in other people, they ingest that information in a much, in a different way. And so with that, we learned how to communicate with each other and watching your tone. And in the watching your tone, it's, so that was 4.5 years ago. And today, like all business partners, we argue, we fight, we have disagreements. Most of the time we can agree to disagree. So Mo recently left at the beginning of May, went on a business trip, and we got into an argument. And, I was just so frustrated in how I was talking to him. It was like he felt I was, lashing out at him, which I probably was. I have a bit of a temper. But in that, we decided, okay, look, this conversation is not really going anywhere. We took a break. 2-3 hours later, before he's about to leave, we sat down and we kind of put our differences aside and said, okay, what's really the matter? We explained it. We had, I guess, what you call like a tete-a-tete or a heart-to-heart. We were able to iron out the differences. We patched things up. He went on his trip. We continued as such, and you move on. So a lot of that is really being able to put the water under the bridge, leave your ego aside. Now, specifically to watch your tone, one thing I learned the hard way was emails. So we could think we're saying something sarcastic or funny in an email, and the other person may completely interpret it in a completely other way, different way. So one trick that I've started to do is that when there's something on my mind, whether it's with my business partner or the people that work with us, it's write your points down and talk to yourself in the mirror. Say it out loud. Think about all the different ways that it can get interpreted, because in today's day and age, when we have great employees, you never want to lose them, right? And so one thing comes out with the wrong tone can be interpreted by someone in a completely different context in which you intend it to be, and that can end a very important relationship. So that's one little trick that I've learned to do to deal with my personality quirks, and it's served us and served the company pretty well. Next is what I call the euphoria doom curve. So for all of us who have started businesses out before, we know that what happens is when you get that initial idea and you get someone else to buy into it, it's euphoric. It's like, we're going to be gazillionaires. We're gonna take down Facebook and Google and everybody else, and no one can stop us. And then as you start to let the idea and start to think of all the different moving pieces in the whole equation, once that starts to distill and simmer for a couple of days, weeks, months, even sometimes years, you start to see all the kinks or, the holes. So it becomes like a block of cheese, then it becomes Swiss cheese, and then it becomes a piece of cheese. And so what I like to see, the peaks here are euphoria and the valleys are doom. And what happens is, and this is my metaphor, is that as we learn to work with each other, we will be able to withstand the gyrations or the volatility in the relationship. So, an idea high, and then you realize all the kinks are getting low. Then you start to build the product, whether it's, a service or an actual physical product or a piece of software. You go through the trials and tribulations of that. And, this will either tear people apart or will bring them closer together. And then it becomes validation. Let's bring it to some potential customers, or show other people in the industry, what do they think. Those highs and lows are nowhere near as big as selling it, because everybody likes your idea, but until someone's ready to cut you a check for it, those highs and lows are much different. And then finally it's sales, right? So there used to be days where you'd have the highest high in a day, and then like 5 minutes later, an hour later, you get slammed with the most devastating thing. And over time, we learn to deal with it. And funny enough, so every December we plan for the year. And so, we put our plan, we do the year in revision, what went well, what went badly, what can we change, how can we improve things? And you're like, this year we're finally, things are going to cruise along. We can finally start taking ourselves out of the minutia of the business. And then something else comes along and smacks you. And it's just like, now we have to go back in, get down, roll our sleeves up again, right size the ship, or put the ship back on course and do that. And it doesn't get easier as your business grows. But hopefully with experience, you have a stronger partnership, a stronger bond, and some experience to be able to make these decisions easier. So building on my euphoria doom curve, I have a couple of, or just one word of wisdom. So does anybody here watch Game of Thrones? Okay, so it's about power sharing, right? Not power struggling. I know I've seen a lot of partnerships, former partnerships of my own. They always end in power struggle. People want to go one way versus the other. And again, it's all boils down to ego. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a psychology degree. But I can tell you from experience, you have to know when to fight. Choose your battles wisely. So now let's talk about successful growth. 35 employees. Oops. So how do you go from being an idea to an actual successful, striving business? So I think it all starts, in hindsight, with aligning your goals and timelines. So what we found is that when we started our business, the three of us, I had a little consultancy, Rav and Mo had a little consultancy, and we wanted to do something bigger, much bigger. Kicked around a bunch of ideas. I happened to have this local marketing thing that was working. It was clicking. I wanted to grow it. So we were able to come up with an industry, a marketplace. But now you have to align yourselves. Do you want to go, big? So what we would call a liquidity event, which is a merger, an acquisition, an IPO. Are you just looking for, a career, having, being able to run your own business, having a stable salary or job, and something that you're passionate about, and you don't really care to be a $50 or $100 million company? Or are you maybe looking to build a business and then step away and have a passive income stream and focus on whatever it is that you want to? Next, really sit down with each other and kind of put together where you guys see yourselves in 3, 5, 10, 20, 50, whatever that timeline looks like. And as you have these discussions, and it's not going to happen overnight, as you have these discussions, you're going to realize that more and more you're either meant to be in business together, or maybe you guys are going to be on divergent paths. Last but not least, this is the most important thing, is being able to have as many possible contingency plans as you can. You're not going to think of every possible contingency or problem, but what it will do is it will allow you to start thinking on your toes to be able to deal with problems that are inevitably going to come up. So roles and responsibilities. Everyone starts as a Jack and Jill of all trades. But as the business grows, you really need to be able to define your roles and responsibilities. Best thing to do is jot down your ideal job description and revise that quarterly, monthly, so that it keeps updating with the business. Last is be honest with yourself. How do you bring the most value to the business? In some cases, maybe the business has grown beyond your abilities. Maybe it's time you take a step back. Maybe it's time you can leave, or you can, pursue something else and it becomes a passive income stream. Last but not least, it's capital commitment. How much money are you versus your partner putting in? What does that makeup look like, right? And then those I find are always the most difficult questions and conversations to have, because some people may be putting in more money. How do you offset that? Is there more sweat equity versus capital? I don't have much more time, but I'll leave you with this. Sales, being someone that's raised, several rounds of venture capital financing, sales is the best source of capital. Banks are a little hesitant or shy to lend to early stage businesses, especially if you're in the knowledge sector. Venture capital or any investors requires dilution of your equity, meaning they're going to take a piece of the business. But one thing I can say is having 1% of something is better than 100% of nothing. So product, another source of contention. Maybe you want to move one way, your partners want to move a different direction. This is one of the first incarnations of our product. It was called Gemi Listed, and this is what it looks like today. So it's, PowerPointed, Microsoft Paint versus professional. Sales and marketing, right? Again, sales is the life of the business. You have to align your go-to-market. So a quick story is that when we started the business, we were always at odds in which markets we were going to hit. What was our go-to-market? Are we going to go towards, small businesses? Are we going to go to advertising agencies? Or are we going to go to brands? And we always had a fight, and we always tried to compromise and try to do all three things. Absolute wrong approach. In hindsight, going to brands was the best approach at the time. So that's afforded us, even though it's what we call whale hunting. You go 3 months starving and then you land a big deal. That was able to afford us to survive and meet our commitments that we made to our investors, to be able to now finally start focusing on SMB agencies and whatnot. Also, it's good to decide whether or not you're product, marketing, or sales focused. Product focus is you're putting a product in market, and it's almost like a pool. People will come to it. Sales is obviously push, and marketing is less aggressive push than sales. And then there's product market fit. There's no bigger high than your first sale. And then when you're able to repeat that a couple times. But what tends to happen is groupthink. You're all sitting around, we're the best. I can't believe we sold this. We sold 8 of them. We got $100,000 for this, and it really takes us 10 minutes to do. And you get that groupthink going, and all of a sudden you guys think you're the best thing since sliced bread. Avoid that at all costs, because what happens is that when something goes wrong, if you're all drinking that Kool-Aid, it's another source of contention, because one person is not going to be able to perhaps admit where they have a shortcoming in that recent failure. And last but not least, building a team. So what we find is culture and attitude are the absolute most important things, right? When you're a young business, you just need to be able to get labor or people on as much as you can. It's more about affordability than the right person. And growing from last year, we grew from about 10 people to about 35 people in 1 year, in tripling our sales. And so this is some of the experiences that we had. You have to be so aligned with your partners on what kind of culture, because you're building the culture, but also what are the right hires for you. So for example, if a partner has an inkling or a gut feeling about someone not fitting, take your partner's word, because they're your partner. At the end of the day, if that's the best person at the best possible price, you have to be aligned with your partners. Last but not least, we've learned this the hard way. We always believe about giving people the benefit of the doubt over and over and over and over again. The second you think that someone is not a fit, or you think about it in any shape or form, their days are numbered. Because that mentality will start to encroach on the entire partnership, because you're going to be honest with your partner. Your partner may say something to you, and it's almost like a cancer. We'll start eating away at it. So if that happens, you have to be honest with yourselves, is that Is this serious? If it's serious, then you have to deal with it. And if it's not serious, then you have to resolve it between the two partners. Because anytime something's going to go wrong, the other partner may come up and say, hey, so-and-so didn't do their job again. And then the other person's going to be defending the person. And it starts to get in between things.